Today I was wanting to go with you guys through the book of Numbers in the Bible. So let's do a breakdown of each chapter in Numbers and an overview, an in-depth study of the book of Numbers. So chapter number 1, there's a census. God commands Moses to actually conduct a census of all the Israelite men over the age of 20 who are able to go to war. So the count is organized by tribes, excluding the Levites, which result in 603,550 men. In chapter 2, it talks about a camp arrangement because God gives specific instructions on how the tribes should actually camp around the tabernacle. The tribes are arranged in 4 groups, each with its standard, and surrounding the Levites who are in the center protecting the tabernacle. So chapter 3 is about the Levites' duties. Details that include the duties and genealogy of the Levites, Aaron and his sons, are designated for priestly service. The Levites are counted, assigned roles in the service of the tabernacle, replacing the firstborn males of Israel. Numbers chapter 4 talks about the Levite service. Further details on the Levite services are in this chapter, specifically which clans are responsible for what part of the tabernacle during transport. There's age limits for service, and they're set 30 to 50 years of age. And a census of these Levites is taken in chapter 4. In chapter 5, it talks about purity laws. Instructions for maintaining camp purity by sending out those with skin disease or bodily discharges and those who have touched the dead. There are also laws about restitution for wrongs and the test for an unfaithful wife, the ordeal of a bitter water. And we'll leave that when we head into chapter number 6. And this is the Nazirite vow. It outlines the rules for individuals who are taking this vow, which include abstaining from wine, not cutting one's hair, avoiding contact with dead bodies again. And this chapter concludes with the Aaronic blessing. And then we're on to chapter 7, which dedicating offerings is in this chapter. It describes the offerings each tribal leader brought for dedication to the altar of the tabernacle, and each leader presents identical gifts on certain days, symbolizing unity and commitment. Chapter 8 talks about the lampstand and the Levites, instructions for setting up a golden lampstand in the tabernacle. It also covers the consecration of the Levites, where they're presented before the Lord as a wave offering to serve in place of the firstborn of Israel again. And then Numbers chapter 9 is an overview of the Passover and the cloud guidance. The Israelites here celebrate Passover in the 2nd year after the Exodus, with provisions for those who could not participate due to ceremonial uncleanliness. This chapter also introduces the cloud over the tabernacle that actually guides the Israelites' movements. And chapter 10 is the silver trumpets. God instructs Moses to make 2 silver trumpets for calling the assembly, directing travel and signaling during wartime. The chapter ends with the departure from Sinai, detailing the order of the tribe's march from Mountain Sinai. Chapter 11 is the complaints and all about the quail. The Israelites complain about their hardship at this time, and this leads God to some anger and Moses' despair. God sends quail, but also a plague because of their ingratitude at this time. Here we also see the appointment of 70 elders to assist Moses. And in chapter 12, it talks about Miriam and Aaron's challenge. Miriam and Aaron speak against Moses because of his Cushite wife, but God actually defends Moses here in chapter 12, resulting in Miriam being struck with leprosy temporarily as punishment. In chapter 13, the spies are sent to Canaan, Moses sends 12 spies to scout the promised land. They return with a report of the land's fertility, but also about the one giants that are inhabiting the land, leading to fear among the people. And chapter 14 is all about a rebellion and God's judgment. The people fear, and then that turns into rebellion against entering Canaan, the promised land, prompting God's wrath. Moses, though, intercedes, but God decrees that the current generation will die in the wilderness except for Joshua and Caleb. And then we're on to chapter 15 in Numbers, which is offerings and Sabbath violations. The laws for offerings after settlement in Canaan include accidental sin. A man is stoned for gathering wood on the Sabbath, illustrating the seriousness of Sabbath observance at this time in chapter 15. And then chapter 16, we're on to Korah's rebellion. A Levite named Korah aligned with some other rebels against Moses and Aaron's leadership. And God punishes the rebels, and Aaron's rod actually blossoms as a sign of his divine selection. Then chapter 17 in Numbers covers Aaron's rod. After Korah's rebellion, God commands the rod from each tribe to be placed before the tabernacle, and only Aaron's rod sprouts, confirming he's the one that God chose for priesthood. And chapter 18, priestly duties and support, it defines the responsibilities and provisions for Aaron and his sons to be the priest and the rest of the Levites, who receive no land but are supported by tithes from the other tribes. And Numbers chapter 19 talk about the red heifer ritual. So this instructs purification from contamination of death involving the sacredness and sacrifice of the red heifer, whose ashes are going to be used for water of cleansing. And then we're on to chapter 20, which is Miriam's death and water from the rock. Miriam dies and the people complain about the water. Moses, in frustration, strikes the rock to bring forth water, but because he didn't follow God's command exactly, he's denied entry into Canaan. And then chapter 21, victories and serpent of bronze is what this chapter is about. The Israelites defeat the Canaanite king, Arad. And after complaining about the journey, God sends fiery serpents. But healing comes through looking at a bronze serpent Moses actually makes. Then chapters 22 and 24 is all about Balaam's prophecies. Balak, king of Moab, hires Balak to curse Israel, but Balaam blesses them instead. His donkey sees an angel of the Lord and speaks, and Balaam delivers several prophecies from Israel's future. This goes back to where it says you can't curse what God's blessed. So then we're on to chapter 25 in Numbers, and this is talking about idolatry. The Israelites begin to worship Baal and Bel, leading to a plague. And then this person, Philinus, I can't pronounce the name, stops the plague by zealously executing an Israelite man and his Midianite woman, earning him a covenant of peace. And forgive me, but some of these names are a little hard to pronounce. And then we're on to chapter 26, which is the second census. Another census is taken to count the new generation of fighting men, showing the changes in numbers over the 40 years with a total of 601,730 men. Chapter 27 talks about Joshua and these daughters of Zelophehad. I think that's how you say it. They petitioned for their father's inheritance since he had no sons, leading to a new law on inheritance. And Moses is told he will die without entering Canaan, and Joshua is commissioned as his successor. Numbers chapter 28-29, festival offerings. It details offerings for daily, weekly, Sabbath monthly new moon, and annual festivals like Passover, first fruits, and the tabernacles. And then chapter 30, vows concerning laws for this vow, especially how they can be annulled by a woman's father or husband under certain circumstances in chapter 30. Chapter 31 is a war against Midian. Israel, under Moses' command, defeats Midian in the retribute for Peor. The spoils of war are divided with provisions for purification and offerings to God. And Numbers chapter 32 is Reuben and Gad's request. These tribes asked to settle in Gilead because it's good for their livestock, and Moses agrees, but requires that they still fight for Canaan. And chapter 33, a journey recap. It lists all the stages of the Israelites' journey from Egypt to the plains of Moab, preparing for the conquest of Canaan. And chapter 34 is the land boundaries. God gives instructions on the boundaries of the promised land and appoints leaders to divide it among the tribes. And chapter 35, the Levitical cities and cities of refuge. The Levites are given cities to live in, and 6 of these are designed as cities of refuge for accidental killers to flee from avengers. And then we're on to the last chapter in Numbers 36, and it's the inheritance laws, and they're clarified here. A final note on inheritance, ensuring that the daughters that we talked about earlier marry within their tribe to keep the land within the tribe, ensuring the integrity of the tribal land allocations. So there you have it. It's an in-depth overview. It captures the narrative elements of Numbers, which serves as a transition from the laws of Leviticus to the historical narrative of Deuteronomy. It details their journey, organization, and legal developments of the Israelites in the wilderness. Hope you guys like this. See you in the next video.